Macroeconomic equilibrium. Macroeconomic equilibrium occurs when AS equals AD, i.e. it's the point where SRAS crosses AD. A shift of either curve will move this equilibrium to a different point, but shifts of AD and AS curves affect things in different ways. So let's start here. An increase in AD alone can only increase output in the short run. The effect of a shift in AD on the equilibrium point depends on the slope of the AS curve. This means the effect of an increase in AD can be quite different in the short and long run. So in my notes here, you can see the one on the left shows short run aggregate supply. I've forgotten to label the one on the right hand side, but that perfectly inelastic supply curve is long run aggregate supply. So let's talk about the one on the left first. This graph shows an SRAS curve along with an AD curve. When there's an increase in aggregate demand and the AD curve shifts from AD to AD1, the new equilibrium point will be at at price level P1 and output Y1. There's been an increase in output, which leads to an increase in derived demand, so more jobs are created and unemployment is reduced. But there's also been a rise in prices. This is demand pull inflation. A decrease in AD will have the opposite effect. Output will fall and there'll be an increase in unemployment and price levels will decrease. On the second of our two diagrams, so the one on the right here with the long run aggregate supply curve, this graph shows the LRS curve along with an AD curve. Now, when the AD curve shifts from AD1 to AD2, the new equilibrium point will be at price level P2. But the output hasn't changed. And, interestingly, unemployment cannot fall because the economy is already at full capacity. So the only effect is that price rises again, and this is an example of demand pull inflation. In both cases, the rise in price levels mean there will be a worsening in the balance of payments. In general, to improve all four macroeconomic policy indicators at the same time, there needs to be an increase in LRAS. This is very important. The amount of spare capacity can limit the effect of the multiplier. If supply is already struggling to keep up with demand, then the multiplier effect after an increase in AD will probably be quite small. The economy just won't be able to cope with any further large increases in demand. So let's look at the first diagram, the one on the left here, where we've got elastic supply. When aggregate supply is very elastic, there is a lot of spare capacity in the economy. In this case, after initial injection shifts the AD curve, the multiplier can take effect to give a large rise in output. In contrast, you can see that when the supply is inelastic, there's much less spare capacity in the economy. So when AD shifts, all that's going to happen is there's going to be a large increase in price, but output will just increase from Y1 to Y2. So just contrast those diagrams and see in the first one, when supply is elastic, how much more the output increases by. Shifts in AS affect all four macroeconomic indicators in the same way. A shift of the AS curve will either improve or worsen all four factors or four indicators at the same time. For example, an increase in AS shown by a shift to the right from SRAS to SRAS1, or 2 in my diagram rather, will lead to an increase in the capacity of the economy. This will result in an increase in output, so there's increased economic growth. There will be more jobs, reduced unemployment as well. the price level will tend to fall and the economy will become more competitive internationally, improving the balance of payments. On the other hand, a decrease in AS would worsen the state of all four macroeconomic indicators. So if you look at the long run aggregate supply curve, where I've got it shifting from LRAS1 to LRAS2, if LRAS increases, then you get similar results. So for example, if it shifts to LRAS2, then you're going to get the output increasing, the price level falling, the balance of payments should improve as you've got a lower price level, and you should have higher levels of employment. The Keynesian AS curve means changes in AS and AD have different effects. So I strongly suggest you draw this diagram before we go any further. With a Keynesian LRAS curve, the effects of an increase in AD can be slightly different. If AD increases from AD1 to AD2, the effects are the same as those described earlier in my video. That is, there's an increase in prices, but no increase in output. This corresponds to an economy that's already operating at full capacity. If AD increases from AD3 to AD4, so on the elastic part of our supply curve where there's mass unemployment, so there will be an increase in output but no increase in prices. This corresponds to an economy deep in recession. If AD increases from AD5 to AD1, well, we're getting at the point where factors of production are getting tighter, we're getting closer to full capacity. So therefore, we'll see an increase in both output and prices. With a Keynesian LRAS curve, the effects of an increase in AS can also be slightly different. If AS increases from LRAS1 to LRAS2, there is a change in the macroequilibrium if AD is either AD1 or AD2. However, if AD is at AD3, there is no change in the equilibrium. There's been a large negative output gap, so the price level is not going to change. This is why economists say there is little point in aiming to increase AS during a depression. The macroeconomic equilibrium will not be affected and there'll be no increase in output or employment. The Austrian school of thought has a different take on macroeconomics than Keynesians. Austrians favour a free market allocation of resources. They argue that governments never have all the information that's needed to allocate resources efficiently, and that all government and central bank interventions, including the tweaking of interest rates, have unwanted effects in the long term. Austrian economists also claim it's impossible just to look at macroeconomic data, for example, figures for aggregate demand or supply or inflation, and then simply work out a set of mathematical equations. That explains the economy. They say this approach ignores the subjective preferences of all individuals in an economy.